Did you know Higher Ed's premier tech conference, Ellucian Live, is almost here? Join industry leaders in New Orleans, March 26th through 29th. Discover insights and game-changing solutions to unlock possibility and drive student success. Register at elive.ellucian.com.
Epic.
3 higher ed authors, 100 plus college and university presidents, dozens of actionable insights for academic leaders. Commencement, the beginning of a new era in higher education, is now available on Amazon. Welcome back, everybody. It's your time to EdUp on the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business. Dr. Joe Salustio back with you on another episode. As you know, recently we passed our 3-year anniversary. 3-year anniversary at the EdUp Experience. Thank you so much for your support. And by the way, if you picked up Compy, that's not even a word. If you picked up a copy of Commencement, the beginning of a new era in higher education, we want to thank you. Kate Colbert, Elvin Freitas, and I put a lot of hard work into that. Let me tell you how hard it was to take the insights from today's most trailblazing leaders in higher ed and put it together into something that made sense. It was really, really hard, but Kate did a great job. Elvin did a great job. I did an okay job, and we're really happy with the result. Somebody that makes me happy every single time he comes on this podcast, and he's been on a lot lately. In fact, I think he stays on the Zoom all day waiting for me to pop on. Here he is, ladies and gentlemen. He's Joe Linhart. He's a Senior Account Executive for Higher Ed Advanced 360 Education. Joe, what's going on?
Oh, not much, Joe. Thanks for allowing me to move in and have a little bed here at EdUp. And
well, you were in the same shirt you were yesterday since we were co-hosting. So you just stayed on the whole time, huh?
Just washed it in between. Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for that clarification. I love it.
I'm a joke maker.
That's what I do here. You know, try to bring a little comedy to the conversation.
Got to be done.
But you know, we've got a great guest. I know, Joe, you and I have been talking about talking to him and how excited we were. He's got a lot to say. In fact, he's one of the most featured presidents in Commencement, the beginning of a new era in higher education. Here he is, ladies and gentlemen. He's Dr. Melik Khoury. He's president at Unity College. Melik, what's going on?
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, Joe and Joe. I just realized I have to say Joe in stereo. Always a pleasure to be back. Follow you folks on LinkedIn and your podcast, and congratulations on the 3 years, and looking forward to a conversation.
Well, you know, I'm going to just jump right into it because I know you have so much to say. And, you know, when we talk about forward-facing, innovative, trailblazing leaders in higher education, and you talk to anybody in this industry, your name is one of the ones that comes up most often. You've done really an incredible job of moving Unity College forward in the last, you know, decade that you've been there. You tell a really interesting story about where you started and where you've come to now. Can you give us a little bit of background? And, you know, when you took over and Unity wasn't in such a great place, and now, boy, oh boy, have you grown.
Yeah, I think, you know, Unity College, like many small private colleges, took a lot of pride at being a single product institution. You know, a lot of these colleges that were created also like in the 50s and the 60s, where we as a college did a really nice job providing small private residential programming to students. And as the world changed, that became tough. As I'm sure you guys know, in the 90s, when the enrollment hiccups started happening, there was a lot of conversation at Unity as to who are we? Who do we need to be? And, you know, people before me who are a lot smarter than me really leaned Unity College into the environmental sciences. And when I came on board, I kind of looked at that and said, oh my God, no, actually, this is a great, a mission niche to be at, because everything, you know, we do in this planet today involves the planet somehow, right? So why were we struggling with growing enrollment? And so we really started to look and deconstruct, why is it as an institution who has a very, very solid mission, a very, very committed and relevant curriculum, was struggling in the enrollment era? And what we realized was it was not our curriculum per se or our mission, but we were basically offering a product in a manner that was getting less and less affordable, less and less accessible, And with the advent of technology and the disruption in higher ed and all of the new, entrants to alternatives to education, we just couldn't compete. So we started to transform. And 10 years later, as an institution, we have grown from an average of about 350 students to over 5,000. And I'm very proud to say that the environmental sciences, which has historically been viewed as a very, I would say, upper middle class program for a very specific type of student, is becoming more and more diversified. And we're really leaning into kind of like green careers of the 21st century. And I'm very glad to say that we are one of the colleges that are growing and serving an audience that historically did not have access to the environmental sciences, and an audience that historically didn't see private colleges as affordable or accessible.
I tell you, and I brought this up because when we looked at the episodes and the presidents we wanted to include in this book, and we had so many quotes from you that we didn't include, and so many that it was like this really hard moment. And I want to just read something to you, part of one of the quotes that we have from you. And I felt this kind of goes along with what you're saying. And I quote you here. It says, "Yet too often, education is only for those who can afford it. Education is only for those who are lucky enough to get the scholarship lottery. Education is only for those who are willing to risk being eaten up by the system and walking away with the burden of debt and a burden of displacement." And then you go on to say, "Every human being in the world should be educated because it is those who are uneducated who are most susceptible to any sort of subterfuge." So I'm just so powerful, right? And you're moving Unity in a way to help every student, to make it affordable, which we know consistently and particularly is still a huge, huge barrier for higher ed. What do you do? How do you lead around affordability and tuition with an institution that is continuing to grow? And that means your costs continue to grow. How do you keep education affordable? And what does that conversation sound like with you and your staff?
Absolutely. Actually, that is probably one of the most difficult conversations that we have to have, because it is not uncommon in historical higher education to say, this is everything that we need. And so now let's either just go raise the money or increase tuition, right? So when you put the price at the first principle of an immovable, which is what we did, and you say we're also not going to burden our students with ridiculous amounts of fees so that we can say our tuition is low, how do you provide education? Especially when, as you folks know, since 1965, the federal and state funding for education for the gap for student need continues to widen.
Yikes!
A lot of people argue, well, education should be free. Absolutely. Sometimes, to be a little controversial, Joe, if we could treat education like we treat the military, where it's fully funded and completely, bipartisan, and it's a place where people go to learn in order to be civic-minded and be career-ready, I think as a nation, we would not only be the most powerful nation in the world, we will also be the most educated and most progressive nation in the world, allowing all perspectives, not just one.
Yeah.
So for us, we know that we can't solve that problem, right? Changing higher education funding is not within the power structure of Unity College president or board, at least not yet. Until that happens, do we cry uncle? Do we blame the system? Or do we say that our mission is more important than simply, if they can't afford the $35,000, $40,000 alternative loan to come live in residence and get all of the frills, then they don't deserve our education? So we put the price first and say we want to stick to that. And we have not increased tuition in almost 5 years. That really, really forces us to think very, very differently about all of our services, all of our curriculum, everything within the lowest common denominator of effectiveness. And so for us, we designed something called the enterprise model that allows for shared services for centralized things like the business office and HR and facilities, and then allowing these subsidiaries that we are calling sustainable educational business units, each to focus on a specific audience which basically translates to student type, and specific services. Because if you think about it, the adult place-bound student looking for asynchronous online to get that master's degree needs a very, very different facilitator, educator, student support as a freshman living in housing. And for too long, when you blend all of those prices together, you're going into a buffet, not an a la carte. So for us, we really invested in making sure that we understood the cost of breadth versus the cost of depth of curriculum, which is why we don't have so many majors of 5 or 6, because there is an economy of scale in offering cohorts the right size. We really looked at providing differentiated services to students depending on our subsidiary because they have different needs, but really invested in the technology, the student support, and the instructional design to allow our educators to put their best foot forward. So it's really a model designed around the fact that if you can't have a student write a blank check, doing a little bit of what do they really need versus what it would be nice to have allows you to really cater differentiated tuition, which is why, as you can imagine, our residential program, their tuition is slightly different than our online program. It's slightly different than our community college program because we offer different levels of education and services. And that's been the conversation, is how do you do this without affecting the quality of education? And my faculty and staff, I think, have really risen to the occasion once we put the framework of raising tuition and adding fees is not part of the conversation. That influenced innovation.
I like your style, dude.
What I want to say before I pass it to you, Joe, is what I like about what you said, Melik, is it's so important. When you hold tuition constant, your expected revenues are easy. You're able to know what those are. Mm-hmm. And so when you're looking at the expenses, you have to make very careful, strategic, important, and intentional choices. You can't just go, oh, wow, we'd like to have this new the software that students could have, and we'll just pass on a $150 charge to the students this cycle. And all of a sudden you got to charge for this and you got to charge for that. And there's a fee for this and a fee for that. And then, boy, nobody wants to cut those things when it comes down to it. So if you put the student at the center, Joe, and you know this, we've both done this for years, you have to be very careful and intentional about the choices that you make.
Yeah, 100%. And well, just so you know, I spent a couple of decades in higher ed myself and in executive leadership. And so certainly can respect where you're coming from. It's so hard. It's so challenging. And I heard two different phrases or words that you talked about. One was innovative, and the other was problem solving. And that seems to be what you guys are all about. And I wanted to transition because here was my perspective when I read your website. So often I've been at many institutions, so many of the programs that are out there have just been repackaged and recanned, and everyone does the similar kind of model across the country, it seems. Yikes. And yeah, there's great value in that. But what I loved about your programming is that it's innovative and it seeks to solve problems of right now, today. And you seem to be, from a business standpoint, pouncing on an opportunity with that need. And so I wanted to see if you could talk about some of these programs, because it's completely unique from across the country as I look out there.
Absolutely. I think that if you look at our programming, we are an environmental science institution. Yeah. Sometimes I make the joke that we are basically a biology school that has really taken the concept of biology and broken it down into, what historical institutions would say, we have a biology program with a concentration in this and a concentration in that. We said, okay, what are the jobs out there? What are the careers out there that are in our environmental mission space? And we leaned on that. We also, Joe, just to digress for a second, we're also fighting the perception that a lot of institutions talk about, are you learned or are you job ready? And I think that is the worst misconception and false dichotomy I've ever heard about our industry. True education is a combination of the core curriculum, making you a decent human being, a critical thinker, a writer, a team player, a civil servant, an environmental awareness, kind of that, being educated. But it also comes with getting you ready for your first career. So at Unity, we took that step. We are mission driven. So all of our programs revolve around the environment and sustainability. We understand that in order to graduate a career-ready individual, they also have to get the basics of what it means to be a decent human being. Higher ed calls it the core curriculum, or the gen ed, or the liberal arts. And then we looked at what out there is needed. So if you look at a lot of the job demands out there, especially in the areas of environmental sciences, right? And you look at our programs, one of our fastest growing program is marine biology. One would argue, because we all know this, that 73% of this planet is covered by water. So having a major that really deals with that blue economy isn't so far-fetched. And so we've got master's programs in them, we've got baccalaureate programs in them, and we are creating associate's programs with them. And the idea that that can only be taught in a residential campus is also a misnomer. We offer it, I like to think we are modality agnostic, or getting there. So
Amazing.
So we are working with a lot of folks who work in aquaculture, who work in aquariums, who work on oceanfront reserves and the like, and we are their guide on the side for marine biology. Another one that we offer that is very, very popular at Unity is wildlife biology, right? We actually launched a new major that's first term is in February, called wildfire management. With the changes that are happening with climate, we want to make sure that there are more professionals who are able to work and lead in that environment as wildfires get to become more often. Another one, a program we are very well known for, is conservation law enforcement. If you think about the outside, park rangers, forest rangers, game wardens, people who work in the outdoors. So what we're really saying is that there is an economy out there, or what we are coining as the green economy, that needs educated, environmentally minded superheroes who are working in those fields. And we've taken a very, very different tack than simply looking at the environmental sciences as a political conversation. That's the problem. It's a real complex issue that involves people, profit, and planet. And our graduates learn that, but apply it to an industry. And I can go on about our other programs, but that would take all day.
I can see why you're so excited as a leader about this campus and this university. I start thinking about what's in your head. Like, do you see this as scalable, across the country, beyond online, other campuses, or because the need is certainly out there? I live in Colorado, and so we deal with wildfires, for example, every single year. What are your thoughts on scalability?
Sure. Actually, fundamentally, what I am trying to do with my team is to build a scalable model. Because Joe, as you know, most colleges are built to capacity. They're not built for scalability, right? If I bring in X many students, I fill so many dorms, I'm done. A lot of the elite institutions, right, there is a limit because they are not built to scale. Some of the institutions that have already been built to scale are considered outliers, like Southern New Hampshire University, Western Governors, ASU, which in the past have come under fire because traditionalists don't like change. So we are trying to build a scalable model, right? The old joke in business is we are losing $500 per student, but we're going to make it up in volume. Is not a thing that we want to incorporate. So for us, what is scalability? So we just partnered with Salesforce, for example, to build a comprehensive, what I call prospect to plan giving IS system that is designed to be basically multi-layered, to allow us to have the data that we need to really research, communicate, and support students, because that is one way to scale without having to add unnecessary human capital, which can sometimes be expensive. The other way to scale that we're doing our scaling is we're looking at our curriculum and looking at what efficiencies do we have within courses so that we can really create a very a quick path to graduation, be it a certificate, a micro-credential, or a full degree. But to answer your question more specifically, well, that is the subsidiaries that we've created are willfully, pedagogically distinct from each other, because I believe that the future is modality agnostic. Asynchronous online works for a certain population. Expeditionary programs works for a certain population. We are also investing in our new technical institute, high flex classrooms, to allow for synchronous communication amongst different locations. We are also beginning to research XR as we use digital, Meta University of the future to really be interactive in a different way. We want to be where the students are. We want to connect them to our faculty, to our advisors, to our support network, to their potential employers, and get beyond this idea that if you cannot come to our campus and spend 4 years, you are somehow less than. But if you can, more power to you, because we have something for everyone. So on the scalability side, this model, for example, the technical institute that we are building, our hope is to have these pop up in different states in the future where there is need. But there's a parent company that can reallocate resources so that you never have to shut something down. You just have to reallocate your resources and go where the demand is. That's how we plan to be scalable, an economy of scale, being relevant. And just recently, I hired a new VP, and her job is to say, what about those students who don't want a degree, who don't want full credit, who don't care about accreditation? How about employers who are not large enough to have their own education arm, but could partner with us to create curriculum to help their unskilled labor force become skilled? The environmental mission is core, and we need to make it multifaceted and be in the education world, whether you want an unfacilitated training or a PhD. And that is our goal.
Nailed it.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I have your
Attention.
It's time for us to solve the puzzle of success in higher education. Get your ticket to Ellucian Live for industry insights, powerful connections, and innovative solutions. From March 26th through 29th, join peers from around the world in New Orleans to unlock the possibility and drive student and institutional success. Learn more and register at elive.ellucian.com. You know that the world of higher education is experiencing evolutions and revolutions. You want to be part of the progress. Commencement, the beginning of a new era in higher education with insights from more than 100 college and university presidents, will show you how. Get your copy of Commencement, the beginning of a new era in higher education now on Amazon right away. We think you're going to love it. It's
Amazing.
Yeah, I totally nailed it. And that pool is growing. I've seen it in my own family. The mindset of the student is certainly evolving. I know, Joe, you're seeing that at Lindenwood.
Yeah, there's a social consciousness, there's an awareness of things. What I do like about your programs, Melik, is that they're all connected to business, or they're not just like, hey, get a environmental science degree. It's business in this, or technology plus environmental science. You've got your data analytics degree. What does data analytics have to do with environmental sustainability? Well, everything. How can you know how to fix things if you can't measure them? And so you make good connections. But I want to take you back. I want to take you a step back, because you're hitting your groove right now. And you talked about the false dichotomy of job ready or degree ready, education ready. There's so much noise, and you know this because you're on LinkedIn a lot, around the value of a degree. There are more detractors. There are a lot of it's easy to be a detractor because there's a lot to pick on right now. Costs, you pick on costs. We pick on costs, and we're insiders. But you can be an outsider and pick on costs. You can pick on the constant of time. You can pick on the ranking systems and so on. There's just we've made it so it's really easy to pick on higher ed, but we also don't fight back very well. We don't I say we there it's what do they say? You could have one negative person affect 9 other people, but you don't hear from the one positive person. And I've always said now the EdUp Experience is where we get the people who come on and say, yes, we have to have degrees. We have to have a highly educated person, or else. What is the or else, right? So can you talk about that just a little bit more in depth, and where we are as a state of a society as we're having this conversation around degree and non-degree and higher ed versus post-secondary ed, and you need it, you don't need it. Where do you stand on all that?
I think it's a false conversation that is not dealing with the root cause. Education has always existed in some form. Higher education in its current construct has existed for a little over 200 years. And until 1965, it really was for the 5%. And we took a model that only worked for the 5% and tried to democratize it, and with the GI Bill and the Higher Education Act, and didn't fund it appropriately. And what you're seeing is basically a reaction to an idea that is unfunded.
True.
Then you get to the fact that those of us in academia have always been trained that higher education is not an industry. So we are not even willing to have the conversation that whether we like it or not, as funding declines, as alternatives come up for a barrier for entry goes down, we have to compete for the value of higher ed. That we are having the wrong conversations. Let me just give you a little bit of a metaphor, then I'll get back to higher ed. It's the same argument I have with people about climate change. Climate change is not the problem. It is the symptom. It is the symptom of bad policy. It is the symptom of overpopulation, of food issues, of energy issues. You've got all of these ecological and human interactions that are being done without a well-rounded education around the affect of how we are engaging with this planet. And we've turned it into a soundbite of, is it really all Republicans don't believe in climate change and all Democrats? Like, we have become such a dichotomy nation that we cannot have a complex argument, and it takes it away. And I think higher education has gotten into that groove where it is easy to say it's not worth it until you get a really uneducated population. I think what is really being said is the construct of higher education as designed pre-1965 is unsustainable. And we have people in the academy that believe it shouldn't be an industry and feel by attacking the other, faculty, staff, administrator, alum, misinformation, gaslighting, that somehow the world will look at us and go, oh my God, we need to help them. Instead, people are getting disinterested in our problems because they seem slightly privileged.
That's interesting. Isn't that? So the perception is that there's privilege, so I'll be disinterested in helping because I have no interest in helping people who have this privilege.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. We also look at higher ed as one big monolith. I mean, if you are Harvard or Bowdoin or one of these big elite institutions with billion-dollar endowments, your business model, your value is very, very different than a state school that needs federal funding or state funding, or a private school that is tuition driven. And I mean, we accept this differentiation in technology, in real estate, in restaurants. I always joke, higher ed has been gone down to everybody wants filet mignon at hamburger prices. But we are also at fault, Joe, because we have confounded education as one giant residential experience and are unwilling to decouple it into its core pieces, the learning, the growing, the support, and the like. So the argument that you're hearing in higher ed is that right now about higher ed, in my opinion, is basically a symptom of a frustrated population that feels that education is important, but don't know what to do to fix it. And those of us from inside are sometimes too busy throwing stones because we think if we can blame one aspect of this organization, we are somehow not connected to them. And it goes down to, we don't believe as a group that we are an industry, and the public is having a blur as to exactly what our value is.
100%.
It is interesting that you, Joe, and Melik, that you said that we are kind of lumped together. Because I mean, how many times have you heard somebody say higher ed is? We all have done it. Higher ed is this. Higher ed's not worth it. and then you put another industry in where the word higher ed is, and you say restaurants aren't worth it. Wouldn't your next question be, what restaurants are you talking about? Right? Like, what are you talking about? So we've kind of accepted the fact that that we're all lumped together, or that people lump us together, but there are so many differentiated models and types and innovations. And Joe, I know you know a lot about that because you worked for some innovators.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you started out your answer there with or your comments about us being divided, essentially. And it is such a problem in this country and drives me crazy. And it's part of the reason I love leadership and I love culture. And you know that old saying, it's not what you say in leadership, it's what you do. Well, you did something in May that I read about, and I wanted to bring it up and get your comments on it. If I could just kind of transition to culture and your people.
Sure.
You paid bonuses to every employee at Unity, from what I read. I think it was $2,500 or something. And that just caught my attention. And that's you putting your money where your mouth is. And I can so appreciate a leader that puts his people first because of inflation. What are your thoughts around that? And if you have any comments on it, yeah.
Yeah, we actually just to give credit to my team who helped design this package. It was a $2,500 raise. It was an increase. Bonus. You're right. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
It was a 2% increase to retirement match from 6 to 8%.
Wow.
It was a full absorption of the increase of the healthcare for the year premiums, and an average of 10% raise to really support our employees because of the effects of gas prices, energy, inflation, and the like.
Amazing.
But what you don't hear is I could not have done that if the employee base did not create a scalable model that allowed us to grow, so that we had you guys understand the concept of economies of scale and fixed cost versus variable cost, right? So the fact that our team, and we had a little bit of a labor shortage, so a lot of my people were like doing double duty. And so we had some savings from the salary bucket because we had so many open positions trying to hire. And as a non-for-profit institution, after you've kept tuition flat, after you've invested in the technologies and all the things that you need to keep your operations, there were two things that we could have done. We could have taken that surplus and squirreled it for a rainy day. Or we could have said to our employees, you did the impossible. You grew 30% when most of your peers barely stayed flat, and that included the elites. It is time in higher education we stop seeing growth, economy of scale, efficiency as a negative because I have to do more. And it is time that you started to see that as we grow, as we become more effective, as we have more alums who are productive members of society, you will grow with the institution. I think fundamentally, because the business model of higher ed has always been around, we've got money to spend, not it's about revenue generation and growth. A lot of units see growth as more work, because a lot of budgets and a lot of departments in higher ed are not designed around scalability and heuristics. So if I am the residential life director, my job is actually better if my dorms are empty. But if I create incentives and support to make sure that they create a lively community. And I also wanted to make sure that we did not do the mistake of only revenue generators. I wanted to see that a rising tide, right, floats all boats. So when the institution grew 30%, we met our minimum budgetary requirements to make sure that we are, strong. The rest of that, I gave it back to the employees. And I think what I'm hoping it shows is when we do well, our employees do well with us, and they are more likely to stick with you when you have a bad year, because intrinsically they will understand that it's not that you don't want to give them a raise that year or a bonus that year. Every organization goes through a rough patch. And so that's kind of the idea here, is that you set a budget, you know how much you need for your reserves, you know how much you need for your deferred maintenance, you know how much you need for all of that. whatever's left, why squirrel it all away when you could take the people who made it happen and not just say thank you in a nice speech, but give it to them at a time when half this country was losing their jobs and or struggling to pay bills. And that was the motivation behind that. Folks responded well to it. As in any good higher ed, some people were like, what is that? That's not normal.
Epic.
And those are those moments in leadership that are so powerful and that I love so much. I haven't run a school myself for almost 2 years now. And we had this thing called COVID that changed the dynamics of education so much. And we could spend 2 hours talking about that. But one of the things you mentioned that came out of this thing was the talent shortage or a labor shortage. And you seem to be dealing with it in a smaller state. And I just wonder, how are you addressing it as a leader? I know it probably keeps you awake at night. How do you deal with it going forward?
Yeah, I mean, it's really, really difficult because, first there is the global labor shortage, but then we also live in a state that is not densely populated. Maine is a large physical footprint of a state, but small population.
Correct.
And it's a balance too, because I also want to be careful that, there are a lot of traditionalists in higher ed that if they come to Unity, they would implode. So it's a combination. So we've done a couple of things. We've always been good. We have a motto here called Leadership in Abundance, where we're very good at promoting from within. And we've also done a lot of succession planning where every position we have has like a lieutenant. So when people, resign or people get a better job, and by the way, I encourage that. I mean, if one of my employees can get a better job, getting everything that they've ever dreamed of, we don't look at that here like most higher ed is. It's not. I mean, I encourage my people to tell me when they're being poached. Heck, if they're better than us or bigger than us, or I'm not there yet, more power to them. And those who want to stay, we will help. So we work in a lot of workforce, a lot of training. We also expand a little bit our approach to who is qualified. We don't just hire from higher ed. I have a number of employees that come from different industries. I have a number of people I've got people from banks. I've got people from tech. I've got people from hospitals. I've got people from hospitality. So I've always said you can teach skill, and we then invest in training. When you start to work at Unity College, for example, it takes you about 90 days before you actually do any real work, because it takes that long to help you learn how we want to work instead of just do whatever you want and just stay out of our way. So we've also introduced some flex work opportunities, right? Which is getting very, very popular. I know some organizations want to go fully remote. Some organizations are going fully in place. So we've got a remote benefit that allows people to come in, 2 to 3 days a week to create some of that flexibility. There are some key positions that we are fully remote. There are some key positions that are fully in place. And one of the tricks to that, Joe, that I think has really worked for us is we do it based on the position of the person. This position needs to be remote. This position needs to be in place. This position is afforded flex. And then people are hired into that, not the person who wants it or doesn't want it. It has to be about the job, not about the person. And then let people choose. So it's training from within, investment in training and professional development, expanding your perspective on who is a qualified candidate with cross skills. And so for us, it's been difficult, like everyone else, but we've been able to stem that tide because we've also changed our hiring practices. I mean, as you know, in higher ed, you send out an ad, you wait 3 months till all the apps come in, and then a search committee decides who will come without asking them. I mean, I'm not telling you anything you don't know.
No,
well, let's start the insanity.
I created a talent acquisition sub-department of HR, and they just call people who will never apply here and say, hey, do you want to talk to our CEO? He's interested in telling you why this would be a great job.
Love it.
And some people will talk to me and go, no way. And that's okay too.
Yeah, I did a video on that just last week. One of my LinkedIn videos about leadership was on that very topic. And all I know is you're striking the right message. If I were interviewing with you, I would want to follow you, right? So not patronizing, that's the truth. So, right, Joe?
Yeah. And Malik, before we get to our final two questions, I have to ask you, because you are so passionate and I love listening to you. I follow you on LinkedIn and I listen to your videos because it's all about learning for all of us. And you are always high energy. And when you're scaling and you're building and you're refining and you're implementing and you're leading, it takes a lot of energy. How do you stay high energy? What's the secret? What are you taking? Are you running 5 miles a day? How do you keep it up?
Well, for me, thank God, I have such an addictive personality that I'm glad I'm not addicted to anything. Otherwise, I would say for me, and this might be a little bit of a sappy answer, Joe, but it's an honest one. This is really a labor of love for me. I am one of those lucky few who was plucked out of obscurity and given a scholarship to get an education. And it changed my life. And I look back and I look at the amount of colleagues and friends I had as a kid who, in my opinion, were better than me, smarter than me, faster than me. Some of them not alive today because they did not get that luck. I also came as an immigrant from countries where if we understood how the environment is affecting resources, maybe I would still be there. And maybe I would have been a productive member of society there. So ignorance is such the weapon of choice that I wake up every morning, you talk about high energy, and I want to find a way to make sure the seventh daughter of a Hispanic family does not have to stay at home so that the eldest son can go. So that the African family does not have to sacrifice an entire community to pool their money together to give their one child a scholarship so that she can be a doctor, so that she can come home. We in this country have the biggest privilege of all access to education. And we are politicizing it. We are attacking people like me because of my disposition. I don't know if you read the article about me in Down East magazine. As an immigrant who does not know his place in higher education, I was ostracized. But I wear that as a badge of honor. Because at the end of the day, you want to know where my energy comes from? If I can leave a small spark of a legacy that allows a bigger institution, a different institution, to take our model and turn it into something so scalable that no child, no mother, no military vet, no human being will ever not need or have access to information for their community, then my life is worth it. This job is worth it, and the hate is worth it, which is why I stay away from politics and social capital. Because if I need people to like me, I will become a politician, and then I will only be gathering wealth. I always joke, I'm lucky I don't have a large endowment because I'll actually use it, not hoard it.
Beautiful.
I am glad I asked that question.
Same.
For the record. Wow. I'm going to use that as a soundbite, Melik. That was one heck of an answer, and I appreciate you. Joe, do you have any last ones in before I give him the final two?
No, I'm good. I'm anxious to hear what you got for him. I'm just really soaking this up and enjoying it so much. So thank you.
All right, Melik. So we want to first question to you. What did we not say about Unity College today that you'd like to say? By the way, Unity College, America's environmental college, just so you know. But what do you want to say? Is there anywhere you're speaking, anything coming up about the college, anything going on that you want to talk about? I want you to take a couple minutes and say whatever it is you want to say. No questions. You just take the mic and run. And then close us out with what you see as the future of higher education.
Sure. That probably is a harder question than anyone you've asked. I believe it or not, I'm actually not very good at, kind of the saying all the good things about this college, because to be honest with you, I would not know where to start. I will say that we are very proud of the fact that we are celebrating the 10th anniversary, or just completing, of being the first institution in the nation to divest our endowment portfolio from fossil fuels. Which sparked multi-trillion-dollar movement that then followed by Harvard and all the big players, and most recently even the state of Maine. As Unity is also expanding into new programs, we are launching this technical institute that will be, I think, the first of its kind, which will be a high flex kind of, career-ready program designed on 2-week courses where we are charging $250 a credit hour and no fees as a way to reach those folks who are looking for technical jobs in the green economy, like in energy or agriculture or vet tech or data analytics, and might not want a 4-year baccalaureate. And I think for us, over the next 3 years, we are investing very, very heavily in becoming a modality agnostic institution where we can look at our curriculum and offer it using different pedagogies so that a student can mix and match everything from a residential expedition to an AR experience and get credit. So for us, it is about expanding our footprint to a socioeconomic population that doesn't think that environmental sciences is a career or even affordable for them. And that is what we're going to be doing over the next few years, really expanding our audiences. To your question about the future of higher ed, I think the future of higher ed cannot continue to be an independent house on the hill, duplicating resources that are available within its community to an elite group of students. But higher education really needs to partner with industry and government in a bipartisan way to say, what are the basic skills that we need to make sure that we have a population that is productive, civic-minded, and not affected by all of the deep fakes and all the technologies that are coming up because they don't know right from wrong. It's not about skill building. It's about having a nation that understands, knows how to think, knows how to talk. And how do we do that more affordably, more accessible, make it more accessible? So for us at Unity, in the space of the environmental sciences and sustainability, we strive to be fully tuition-free someday. I don't know how it's going to happen. Where we provide education in degrees, in micro-credentials, in workforce development, in apprenticeships, in internships, in continuing education, we want to provide tools and toolkits for people to be able to introduce the concept of the environmental sciences and sustainability to any industry. And right now we are doing it on the margins, and we have been able to keep tuition low, but it's only a matter of time before this model gets adapted into a larger scale, because education is not about modality. It's about education, and it cannot be separate from students' lives. This idea that higher education is America's global Rumspringa of coming of age to go before you go and become an adult is only a subset of true education. It has to be for everyone. And that's what I think education is going to happen. It's going to go by the way of the music industry. If I may just indulge for 1 second, I love
Mike
using
yours,
this in
my
all
friend.
of my interviews. No one argues, no one will ever argue that a live concert by Garth Brooks is not worth watching. I'm a big Garth Brooks fan. But if I can afford to go and watch Garth Brooks, are you going to shame me for buying the CD? Are you going to shame me for downloading a song? Are you going to shame me for listening to it on YouTube? Now imagine that was education. Should a student be shamed because they cannot afford a $40,000 alternative loan to go to a campus? Should they be considered less than? That's the perception that I am fighting. Education has to be truly accessible to all. And I don't know how that's going to happen, but we are going to do our part, especially with the environment and sustainability.
Well, I'll tell you one thing that I love about what you said is when you talk about leadership and vision, boy, couldn't I see in my mind you painting a picture. And I can see why your team at Unity College is equally as passionate as you. You're painting an driving an incredible vision. And Joe, I know you're into leadership, and that was a whole vision conversation, wasn't it?
Absolutely. I just feel like I like to use this term about creating ripples, within a college or a university, and your vision is just rippling across that campus. I can just see it on the canvas, as Joe said. So,
Well, as we're
thanks for
talking about
sharing.
America's environmental college, rippling is a good metaphor, I would imagine. Well done,
My
Joe.
work here is done. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're not going to let him say another thing because it can't be better than that. He's Joe Linhart. He's Senior Account Executive for Higher Ed at Advanced 360 Education. Joe, thanks for joining me again on another episode, my friend. I think I got you again this week, don't I?
You do. And thank you. It's always my pleasure. I love talking about this stuff. And Melik, thank you so much. And on behalf of our team at A360, I know we're looking forward to serving you and learning from you. And so we'll see you soon.
What I want you to do now, ladies and gentlemen.
Come on, put your hands up in the air.
For my guest today, if you didn't get motivated, then you weren't listening. And if you weren't listening, I don't know why you have this podcast in your ears. He's Dr. Melik Khoury. He is president at Unity College, and he is one passionate leader. Melik, thanks for coming back on the podcast. You know it's an honor to have you here.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've just EdUp'd. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for some
amazing
news. It's time to work together to solve the puzzle of success in higher education. Ellucian Live returns to New Orleans from March 26th through 29th to help you unlock possibility for your institution. And yes, the EdUp Experience will be there recording live. Industry leaders from all across the world are converging to discover new insights, game-changing solutions, and powerful connections, all with the goal of addressing higher ed's greatest opportunities and biggest challenges. You do not want to miss Ellucian Live. Learn more and secure your seat today at elive.ellucian.com. It will be
amazing.
It's time to
Level up.
The beginning of a new era in higher education begins with you. Order your copy of Commencement, The Beginning of a New Era in Higher Education by Kate Colbert, Dr. Joe Salustio, with contributions by Elvin Freitas. It's higher education's must-read book of 2022. Discover how you can seize the moment to change higher education forever. Commencement, The Beginning of a New Era in Higher Education, now available on Amazon. For bulk orders, contact Kate, Joe, or Elvin.